All right. Hey, it is Brian Winter with Forever 11, and today we are here to wrap up a 6-part series that we've been calling The Art of Good Storytelling. And I'm going to wait for my buddy David to hop online here and join us. But in the meantime, let me just give you a quick rundown of where we've been. When we first started this series, we kind of gave an overview of good storytelling. And this is not just good storytelling as it relates to art, but it's good storytelling just in general. If you think of books, movies, so forth, we gave a little bit of an overview, and then we did individual sessions talking about plot, setting, characters. Last week was point of view, and now we're in our final session where we're going to be talking about something called conflict. And I can see that David is on with us. I think I need to turn his mic on here, though. So give me a hot second. All right. Invite. Okay. All right. David, are you there? All right. Well, we're working on getting David on here. I'm going to start in and say that when we talk about conflict, there are actually 4 types of conflict, if you will. And these 4 types are, I'll just list them, right? So we got character versus self, character versus character, and character versus nature, and finally is character versus society. And what we're going to do is we're going to kind of go through these, and we're going to start to break them down. Okay. Let's see. Hang on one second, folks. I'm trying to get there we go. Okay. David, I've let you into the room. You should be with us now. Yeah. I can hear you loud and clear.
You gotta love Twitter. X Spaces, for their.
Yeah. Exactly. I was like, oh man, we were just talking about this last week. They moved buttons around on me, and I was like, all right, they did it again this week. But hey, we figured it out. At least we can roll with the punches here,
Exactly. Let's run it.
All right. So I just introduced the 4 types of conflict that we have. And the first one that I mentioned was character versus self. And this is when our main character, which we've been referring to as a protagonist, if you caught our episode on characters a week back, when our protagonist is having an internal conflict with, I guess you could say, themselves to overcome a personal battle or achieve a personal goal. And, David, we still got art rolling in, and I've seen a couple examples of this where some of our artists have been like, hey, I'm really excited about this project, but, I got to be honest, I'm a little bit nervous too, because, when you put your work out there, you don't know how it's going to go, right? You could be Jason Aldean releasing a song, and you don't know how the world's going to react, But our artists are taking some risks here, so I can definitely see them identifying with this kind of conflict here.
I definitely agree. And it's arguably one of the most for me it's probably a top 2 element of storytelling, because then if not we're just kind of talking.
Mm-hmm.
There's got to be some sort of relevant point as to what it is that we're getting from the discussion in order to turn that over into either, an anecdote or a lesson or something comical. So conflict, very important.
Yeah. And, I just thought of a real life story that Susan, who's also on with us, Susan is my wife and co-founder of Forever 11 here. And we were just talking about this last night. This is a story about our son. And actually, I'm coming live with you guys today from Oakland Community College here in Michigan, and that's where my son is finishing up his welding program here. And that's what he's doing. He's working on this trailer right now that he assembled from basically nothing, right? And a week ago, he just came home and is like, I just want to be done with this stupid trailer. I'm tired of working on it. It's way over budget. I wish I had just done something simpler, something easier, something blah, 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 blah. And, Susan really had to kind of explain to him, he's 19, so he's still kind of like learning a lot of the stuff that, every major project that people take on, it's very common get to that point when they get to the end, and it's usually right about the 90% mark where you're tired, you just want it to be done, you're already maybe thinking or dreaming about what the next project's going to be, and you just want to move on to that. And I got to believe the same is true in some cases for artists. And so in my son's world, that would be a really good example of a conflict, character versus self, which was he just had to overcome this just stress and overwhelm to come up with that final push to get through the last 10% of the project.
Yep, absolutely. I love that. I love that version of time.
But all right, let's move on. Next is character versus character. So now this conflict is coming not from inside the main character or the protagonist, but they're actually battling another person. So this is like the classic, like good guy versus bad guy. This is like, clearly we have our protagonist in Luke Skywalker, and clearly we have our antagonist in Darth Vader, right? And the two are in battle. Each one is standing within the other's way to whatever their, goals or quest, may be. And so in this case, for our artists, it could be maybe somebody in your personal realm or sphere that is getting in your way, from you being able to accomplish your goals. So if you can identify with that, and there's like, oh man, there's this one person, they keep raining on my parade or doing something that is stopping me, then that would be a good character versus character example of conflict.
Yeah, arguably, I would say it's the most common scenario of conflict as well.
Yeah. All right, so now these next ones we are going to move on to. We have two more. They start to get a little bit more nebulous. So the next one is character versus nature. So when we say nature, we're thinking, maybe like Mother Nature, like, it could be a storm, a hurricane, you're stranded at sea or, whatever.
The Pearl, John Steinbeck.
Yeah, exactly. But, it can also be something like maybe health or illness. Even in my research, I found some examples of romance, right? The classic love triangle kind of type story. Those would all be examples of.
That's interesting. So that would be a sort of subsect of character versus character, but it's really heart versus heart because it's emotion, which would tie to nature.
Yeah, exactly. So it, like in this case, like it definitely involves like character versus character, but unless you're dealing with a truly like evil person, which that really stinks if you're, falling for somebody that's just pure evil. But let's assume that's not the case. In a lot of love triangle stories, it's not it's usually not the intention of any one of the characters to intentionally cause pain or harm. It's just this awkward, one object of the affection and two suitors, typically speaking, I would say is kind of the classic example. And the, object of affection is not probably desiring to hurt either suitor. It's just like, man, like this stinks that fate has brought two people interested in, the same person at the same time. And that's why I think they're classifying that kind of like as like nature. Like it's not that anyone's acting badly. It's just really unfortunate, I think.
Right. What about time? So character versus time.
Oh yeah.
Example would be, say, Interstellar with Matthew McConaughey.
Oh yeah. I mean, that's
right.
Yeah, that's totally amazing. And and I think that could even be an extension of the, health or illness, like when we talk about, somebody facing, an illness that they know is maybe likely going to take their life prematurely or too young or, whatever. And it's just like, gosh, how do we maximize the time that we have together, when you just know like the time is ticking, right? Clock is ticking. Mm-hmm.
Which is really for everyone. It's just really just puts it in perspective when, if there's a glaring health issue, but at the end of the day, when we arrive, our clock's already ticking.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Right now it is literally ticking for all of us. It's just, if you're not thinking like that, then you're just not aware. Right. So
exactly.
Yeah, take advantage of it. Yeah. Well, then our last one today is character versus society. And so this is if our protagonist is battling some sort of like perceived or maybe rather overt, like oppressive societal norm, So, I mean, classic, examples is, we could rewind the clock, 50, 60 years and, look at, the ugly side of just segregation and so forth in well, not only in the United States but in other countries like South Africa and so forth, and say, man, like that, in a story like that is a character versus like an entire society, like the way a massive amount of people think, or feel. But there's lots of other ways. I mean, that's a pretty well, actually, no pun intended, but I would say black and white example, meaning that like it's very overt and like we know it's going on, but there's that comes in a lot of other versions that are probably far more subtle. We've seen women over time battle the stigma of, oh, you should be at home taking care of the children, or we see it in equality in the workplace and so forth. So there's all sorts of different versions of that.
Yeah, absolutely. You got my wheels thinking. Definitely would want to expand on some of those things, but I mean, it's one of the most interesting examples. Yeah, I've got like several in my head that are cinematic. Of course, this is really where my brain first goes to, but it's interesting to see, how those things play out when that is the most prominent example in the storyline is the the environment or a group setting or something dealing with society, a workforce issue, where it's still isolated but it still outnumbers the main character. Very, very, very relative example to generally everyone.
I just thought of this example, and this is actually really kind of cool, and I think it's very like apropos of why we're even doing this podcast, and that is, there are many forms of art, and I look at writers, for instance, that write for movies or television shows, or actors as well that perform in them, and musical artists and so forth. All of these types of artists have been fortunate enough, for the most part, to be able to operate in realms where, yes, they can get compensated for the creation of their works in present day, but there's also mechanisms for royalties so that those great works they've created could go on and continue to provide a future income. So like if you write a song, you don't just sell the song and like, well, okay, well, I guess I sold the song, so I'm done. You have the option of, you can perform live in concerts. That could be a form of income. But also, if your song is being played maybe on the radio or used in a movie or something like that, there's other ways you can get compensated for that work that you did a while back. And here we are with visual artists that, for the most part, they've always kind of lacked that, because once that art has sold, it might exchange hands from, seller or, from collector to collector kind of thing. But they've largely been left out of that process until now. Enter the world of NFTs. Now we have a mechanism, we have a platform for which artists can publish their art. It's not perfect. There are some imperfections, but those imperfections are being worked out, and it is getting better. But the goal and the future outlook for NFTs, I think, is very bright for artists, such that they can sell digital or digitized versions of their art, and then have now a built-in mechanism. So as that art changes hands from collector to collector to collector, they can still get a piece of that transaction in the form of a royalty that comes right back to them. And that, I think, is just amazing. And I think it's an awesome example of how our artist, as the character, has a mechanism to take on this conflict of, quote unquote, society, which is the collectors of the art world. Not that they're bad guys per se, but just that they were up against this faceless enemy until now, until NFTs have entered the space and maybe given them a way to overcome this.
Yeah, I agree 100%. I think the possibilities are endless. This is really game changing, and it's part of the process that we're committed to, which is really just education. It's not so apparent to traditional artists or really any artist that hasn't explored Web3 and digital transactions. But it's part of a reason as to why it is a main significant reason as to why, Forever 11 is existing and what it's trying to do to empower the current artistic industry and the community, let them know what this means for their craft.
Yeah.
And more importantly, it doesn't stop. It doesn't stop there. For me, more importantly, it's about bringing sustainability to the business model, and bringing sustainability to the time and the effort that they're putting within their craft. Because if you're going to survive in this, no matter how, and it's an interesting word to use, just, considering how new this entire space is. But if you're going to survive in it, and you're going to take advantage and leverage the technology and the model for the next 5 to 10 years, you've also got to understand there are some fundamental aspects to carry over from Web 2.
Oh, yeah.
And at the end of the day, you got to build a brand, you've got to build a community, and you've got to be able to take what it is that you're doing and putting it out there for the world, but giving it that sense of purpose and substance that is internalized with you, and figuring out how to put it out there. That way that bridge is, the gap is no longer there between community, collector, and then, of course, the artists themselves.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. What you're talking about, David, is you're really kind of saying, hey, look, if you're an artist and you want your artistry and your artwork to be able to put food on your table, you really need to look at that as basically like a business. Like, meaning you have to be able to create a good product. That piece, I think, is easy for artists to focus on. But from there, you need to be able to market that, and you need to be able to plan ahead. You need to be able to finance future projects. You need to be able to communicate, almost like public relations and customer service, and just like have a connection with your niche or your market that is going to be interested in your art. So, it's like you can't just be myopic and focus on one thing, think that you're going to get away with, just creating good art. You got to be able to do all the parts. And and frankly, David, that's why you and I are sitting here talking about storytelling today, because we recognized that helping artists be able to tell good stories about both themselves and their art is really going to help increase the appeal and the demand for their art. It's the same reason, we've said it before, but it's the same reason why when you watch the Olympics, it's summer or winter, it's not just about the athletics. It's why when you watch the prime time coverage, they go and they tell the backstory of some of the, more prominent athletes, because they know if you feel kind of a personal connection with some of those athletes, then you're not just rooting for your country, you're rooting for that person. And that's how they've taken it from just being merely an athletic spectacle to now it's a broader form of entertainment, because you're identifying with the protagonist, in this case the athlete, and rooting alongside them. And then when they win, you feel like you win, and that feeling is such a good feeling. You come back the next night to watch again. So it's just a great example of how they're using storytelling.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree 100%.
Yeah. And that's what we want for our artists here. So come join us at forever11.com, and you'll be able to learn about storytelling with our 6-part series here, and much, much more about how to build your brand, represent yourself, and, get your art in a place where people can enjoy it and it can benefit you and your family, and really work towards your overall legacy, which I think is really what most artists are looking for.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Well, David, thank you as always so much for your time today. This has been great. This has been a fun 6-part series, and I'm excited for the next part of the journey coming ahead.
Absolutely. I'm definitely looking forward to it. Already got some stuff on top of my mind that I know I want to discuss with you.
Awesome.
Everybody continue staying tuned.
Excellent. All right. Take care, y'all.
Take care. Bye-bye.